Good day traders, welcome to the RMDTRADER Weekly Market Fix. For this week we will take a slightly different approach and rather focus on reviewing last week's analysis to see how things played out and also how that ties into what we can expect for this week. For this week I'd like to start by looking at the US dollar to South African rand once again. And on our video last week, we mentioned that we have our yearly pivot, which will be acting as a magnet to draw price towards it. And we also highlighted this area around the weekly S2, that's the monthly S2 pivot and this diagonal support level. And as we can see, price has come down now into this area to test most likely this area of the diagonal support, and from here we will be looking for some buyers to start stepping back in and hopefully drive price back towards this area of last week's highs. And just quickly looking at those new weekly pivots, we can see we have our weekly R1 at 1542, and of course if you can take out this high, we will also be breaking back above the daily 21 EMA, changing our short-term trend back to bullish, and that will likely see us then head back towards that resistance area of our daily 50 SMA at the weekly R2, sitting at about 1575. Moving on now to the EURUSD. The EURUSD has also come back to test this diagonal support area and also the weekly S1 pivot. It does appear to be bouncing somewhat from this area currently, but overall price definitely struggling to get its footing and to get price to move higher towards this resistance of the daily 100 SMA, which it previously didn't quite test, and we were thinking maybe there's a chance that we still test that, but so far it's looking actually more likely that we break lower, heading towards that area of support at 1.115. The GBPUSD also still playing out pretty much as we expected. After rejection of that yearly pivot, we can see price has now retraced towards the area of the daily 100 SMA, with that is meeting up also with the daily 21 EMA. And from here, if we do break lower, I suspect we will continue heading towards this area of our full target at 1.327. If not, there is a chance we see a slight bounce, but at this stage, and just judging from the momentum, I think we will likely see a continuation to the downside on GBPUSD. For the EURGBP, as I've mentioned, we've been trying to call this bottom for some time. We've had this falling wedge formation, and as I've mentioned, we were looking for that final push lower to take out those previous lows, and then of course we saw that big engulfing bullish candle currently residing right on the daily 21 EMA. So this is still very much bullish for me. This does appear to be a good bottom. Whether we see a small pullback perhaps to the area of our pivot of last week and our new weekly pivot at 0.835, that's quite possible. And from there, hopefully we can see price continuing upwards toward this area of the resistance from our monthly pivot and daily 100 SMA at about 0.846. And then from there, of course, that will be breaking the wedge, and we will be expecting a move towards the yearly pivot at 0.862. Looking at the GBPNZD, that has also now finally hit this area of resistance that we mentioned on our video last week. So this area is very strong resistance, both actually horizontally as well as diagonally. So from here, I'm expecting a pullback towards the yearly pivot. That will probably play out over the next 2 or so weeks. But nonetheless, this is where we have all our areas of support converging. So I'm expecting a move into this area. Looking at the AUDUSD, this one is also very much bearish at this stage, which is in line with the current setup that we have identified. We can see we've had rejection from that daily 100 SMA, and currently we're also trading below the diagonal support. So that will be breaking down in line with what we see here is a bearish flag. And I think that target will be, first of all, somewhere in the vicinity of probably down here at about 0.705, and from there a move towards what I believe to be our yearly S1 pivot at 0.683 over the next, again, 2 or so weeks. Moving on to the GBPCAD. GBPCAD, as I've mentioned also, there's been rejection on that yearly pivot. I've also seen rejection of this daily 100 and daily 200 SMAs. All of these has now seen price converging slightly below that on the daily 50 SMA and monthly pivot. So we might see one more test of this area up here at 1.708 before possible continuation lower towards these previous swing lows at the monthly S1, which is sitting at 1.673. So at 1.673. Finally, for the USDJPY, we were hoping for price to start recovering back in line with the major trend, which is still up. We can see we have price still trading above the daily 100 SMA. So with the rejection of that monthly pivot in the daily 50 SMA, I suspect we are still looking for a test of the daily 100 SMA, or perhaps it is possible that we still see a test of this lower diagonal at this area of about 112.08. But either way, I'm still looking for and waiting for a reversal to the upside towards that full target, which is at 116.9. Looking at our indices and looking at the NASDAQ, this has now started to properly break down. And we've also now lost this area of support from the daily 200 SMA and the yearly pivot, which is very major support. The area of support that we've previously also identified is all the way down here between 13,400 and 13,800. So that is the next area of support that we will have to keep an eye out for. It's possible that when we have a retracement that we will see price moving back into this area of our daily 200 SMA, where we have our yearly pivot. So that is sitting at 15,035. So that would be an area to look out for a pullback. But from there, I am still expecting a move lower to the downside and into this area of support. Looking at gold, as I've mentioned, I am overall still bullish on this, and we can see we have now recovered that yearly pivot, and currently we're finding some rejection from last week's R1 weekly pivot, and from here I suspect we might see a little bit of a pullback still, maybe do retest the yearly pivot, but from there possibly that breakout that we've been waiting for quite some time. Finally, let's conclude with Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, we actually expected a price to retrace towards the yearly pivot, but as I've mentioned, the trend is definitely bearish. We have all of these major SMAs trading above price. We have our daily 21 EMA still pointing very strongly down. We can see price has been rejecting the daily 21 EMA very aggressively actually at this point. So for now, we are trading at some support, and we can see price seems to be consolidating slightly. So I'm expecting a pullback. To which degree we might see that pullback, I'm not sure. We can actually draw a Fibonacci just from the low to the highs of what was that? Let's just say from the majority of December, that will see a 61% retracement about to the 50 SMA at 45,000. So overall, still a lot of resistance above. So let's just move that to about 45,000. So that would be an area of resistance should we see a pullback. And then the overall target that we've mentioned for a number of weeks now remains down here at the yearly S1 at 26,400 around, so around about there. So this would be our target that we have been waiting for quite some time, and which we currently seem to have seen playing out. I do suggest that you go back and watch perhaps last week's video just to see how the calls that we've made has played out, and perhaps you can also learn more about our process and how we identify these patterns, and also try to predict what the market is going to do, or at least what would be the more likely outcomes to expect. That concludes this week's video. Thank you very much for watching. We appreciate your support and are always keen to hear your feedback or suggestions. Until next time, we wish you all the best of your trading, and remember, trade smart and trade successful.